Hey guys, tonight we're going to travel back to a time when surviving the winter wasn't about figuring out which Netflix show to binge or whether to crank the thermostat. Nope. Tonight, you're a medieval peasant, living in a drafty little wattle and daub hut, huddled around a sputtering hearth, hoping the cold doesn't take your last chicken or your toes. The wind outside sounds like a hungry animal, and everything smells faintly of wet straw and boiled cabbage. The harvest has ended. The fields are bare. The trees look like they've given up. You stand in the doorway, squinting into the grey light of late autumn. The first frost hasn't hit yet, but the mornings already bite your fingertips. And you know what's coming. Everyone does. Winter, the real kind. The one that doesn't care how tired you are, how much food you manage to store, or how many holes your boots have. You probably won't survive this. But that's just part of the fun, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I always love seeing who's out there falling asleep to history. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You watch the sun disappear behind the black silhouette of the forest. By the time the last bundle of firewood is dragged to the edge of the village, your breath is already visible in the air. The older women say you can smell the first frost before it arrives, metallic, sharp, and cruel. And tonight, the air definitely has that smell. Every soul in the village moves a little quicker, preparing, hoarding, praying. Inside your cottage, the rush begins. Everyone has a task, even the littlest children. You're laying dried reeds over the gaps in the walls, trying to keep the wind from slicing in. Your cousin is cramming straw into the chimney corners. Someone's trying to chase a terrified goose into the pen. You nearly trip over a piglet. You whisper a few unkind words about this goose. It glares at you. The preparations are simple, because life is simple. There's no grand solution to the cold, just dozens of small acts of desperation that barely keep it at bay. You hang old cloaks over the doors, you tie rags around the window gaps. The sheep that didn't get slaughtered for meat now double as space heaters, if you're lucky enough to have them. As darkness falls, you settle in with the rest of your household. You share one room, one fire, one pile of blankets and itchy wool and the occasional rat. You press your feet against your cousin's back for warmth. They grunt but don't move away. Cooperation is no longer optional, it's how you survive. Outside, the village is silent except for the occasional thump of something falling from a tree or the groan of timber shifting under the cold. You hear a far-off howl, hopefully a dog, maybe a wolf, hopefully a dog. There's no calendar on the wall, no app to check the temperature. But the old folks around you nod solemnly. Winter's come, one mutters, staring at the fire like it owes her money. Her name's Maud, and she's always right about this stuff, which is terrifying, and so it begins. Historically, peasant life in the colder months wasn't just about physical discomfort, it was psychological too. The dark hours stretched long, and people filled them with chores, rituals, and low murmurs of complaint. Candlelight was a luxury, so most folks lived by firelight or none at all. Ever tried threading a needle by hearth glow? Don't. You peek out the door one last time before bolting it shut. The sky's a quilt of black and cloud. Somewhere a raven screams. You mutter something about bad omens, and someone nearby says not to tempt fate. Another says it's just a bird with issues. There's no snow yet, but it's only a matter of days, and once it starts, it might not stop for weeks. Travel becomes nearly impossible. Roads become death traps. Even fetching water from the stream turns into a slippery, frostbitten odyssey. Fringe fact: some medieval villagers believed that the cold wasn't just bad for your body, it could let spirits in. The cold was a thinning of the veil, they said. So now and then, someone nails a rowan twig above the door, just in case. It's itchy, it's pokey. But if it keeps the ice demons out, sure. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants fully understood the causes of weather patterns. They likely didn't have meteorology, but they weren't clueless. Generations of oral knowledge taught them to read the signs, the thickness of animal coats, the behaviour of birds, the sharpness of the moon's light, and gut instinct, lots of gut instinct. As the last of the embers crackles in the fire and you bundle tighter into your scratchy wool, you think about how this is only night one, just the start of the slow, frozen crawl to spring. Your toes are already numb, your nose is running, and your belly is far from full. But for now you sleep, because in the morning you have to find food, chop wood, and possibly wrestle that goose again. Morning comes slowly in winter, or maybe it never really arrives. You wake in a dim greyness, the kind that feels like the inside of a stone. Your breath puffs visibly in front of your face before you even sit up. Someone coughed through the night, too often to ignore, but not loud enough to worry anyone. Yet, your stomach growls, loudly. But you're used to that. You pull yourself out from under the mound of wool and straw and people and blink around at the one-room house. There's no real furniture, just low stools, bundles of dried herbs, and that one corner where mice always win. And of course, the pantry. Except, pantry might be too generous a word. It's a wooden chest and a few shelves. More wishful thinking than actual abundance. You shuffle over in your socks, which are technically just strips of wool tied around your feet, and open the chest. It groans like it's as tired of this routine as you are. Inside, the treasures of your winter diet stare back at you with the dull enthusiasm of a root vegetable. There are wrinkled carrots, a few small onions, dried peas, and one turnip that looks like it lost a bar fight. Next to it, a hard loaf of rye bread you could probably use as a weapon in a pinch. There's also a suspicious-looking cloth bag filled with what you pray is flour and not dust. Preserving food for winter wasn't a gentle hobby. It was a matter of absolute necessity. In most medieval villages, the growing season was short and storage methods were primitive at best. Drying, salting, pickling, smoking meat if you had it. Otherwise, hope and onions. You glance at the ceiling where herbs hang in clumps. Sage, thyme, nettles. You remember the day you gathered them, it was warmer, and you didn't hate your life quite as much. Those herbs are flavour and medicine. Also, they're one of the few things you have in actual abundance. You'd trade your left boot for a single egg, but you've got thyme coming out of your ears. You pull together breakfast such as it is. Boiled peas and a hunk of bread. You soak it in hot water so it softens a bit, technically turning it into something called pottage. It's greyish. The flavour? Slightly salty wallpaper paste with undertones of regret. Still, you eat it. So does everyone else. No one complains. Well, except old Bert. He always complains. Back in my day, he grumbles, we had chestnuts and bacon. Someone mutters, back in your day we also had the plague. Everyone chuckles. A bit too dark? Sure. But that's winter humour. Mainstream fact alert. One of the few reliable winter staples was legumes, like peas and beans. They dried well, stored long, and made up for the protein people weren't getting from meat. In some years, they were practically all you had between you and starvation. And yet, the quirky side of this diet. Folks used to believe certain foods could alter your humours. Yes, those bodily fluids medieval medicine loved so much. Peas were considered cold and moist, so if you were already feeling sluggish, someone might advise eating dried rosemary with them to balance things out. Medieval nutrition was part recipe, part horoscope. You dig around the shelves, hoping you've forgotten a wheel of cheese somewhere. Spoiler, you haven't. Cheese is long gone, used up in the feast for St. Martin's Day. That was over a month ago. Since then, every meal has tasted like the inside of a cupboard, as your sister once put it. She's not wrong. Historians still argue whether peasant diets were consistently starvation level or just monotonous. Some years were better than others. A good harvest might mean salted pork and dried apples into February. A bad one meant chewing bark in January and praying you didn't get sick. You wrap up the leftovers and tuck them back into the chest. They'll probably be lunch or dinner. Honestly, it's all the same now. Your cousin is already preparing to go out. He's got to check the traps near the woods. Sometimes you get lucky and catch a rabbit. Sometimes it's just a furious squirrel. Either way, it's protein. And if you're really lucky, you find mushrooms tucked under leaves. Still edible. If not, it's back to turnips. You help prepare a few bundles of food for storage, mainly by tying more twine around the cloth sacks to keep mice out. Mice, it turns out, love dried peas too, and they don't ask permission. Oh, and if you've been wondering about sweet things, honey, fruit, or even dried berries, yeah, those are long gone. The last apple was eaten weeks ago, probably by someone who claimed they were saving it for later. Later came and went, and the berries? Unless you dried them carefully, they turned to dust or mould. Still, Some villagers believe the winter pantry should never be completely empty. Not for practical reasons, but superstitious ones. An empty pantry meant an empty spring. So folks would sometimes leave a crust or two behind, an offering to fate or fortune, or maybe just in case the fairies were watching. You take a moment to count what's left, not because it helps, just because it gives you something to do. 4 onions, 6 carrots, 1 bag of flour that smells slightly like regret, and that turnip which you now deeply resent. It'll have to do. You sit by the fire chewing on what might be your 3rd piece of stale bread this week, and you can't help but glance up at the ceiling. It's not that you expect anything exciting to be up there. It's that something just dropped into your porridge. Probably straw, hopefully straw. You fish it out without asking too many questions and keep chewing. The thatched roof is holding, but just barely. As the wind picks up outside and snow begins to thud softly against the outer wall, you can hear the creaks and shifts of your humble hut like it's a living thing, an elderly, irritable one that's overdue for repairs. The roof leaks in a few places, despite the last-minute patching you did with moss and mud, and when the snow starts to melt, even slightly, it drips through the beams in a sad, rhythmic plink, plink, plink. This, right now, is your winter shelter. A wattle and daub hut. Woven wooden slats stuffed with a mixture of mud, straw, and manure. Honestly, it's better than nothing, but it's not exactly a fortress. The walls crack in the cold, and the thatch roof, the one you spent days layering, is your only line of defence against the snow. You push your stool a few inches back from the worst drip, which is now landing suspiciously close to the fire. At least the hearth is still going. Barely. In theory, it should be the heart of your home. In practice, it's a stubborn pile of smoky logs that crackle resentfully and cough ash into your face. You rub your eyes and add a few more sticks, hoping they catch. You'd kill for good, dry wood. You'd also kill for clean air, because right now your cottage is basically one big smoky onion-scented sauna. Everyone inside looks a little glazed over. Your uncle, wrapped in 3 cloaks and a sheep's hide, hasn't moved in an hour. A child pokes at a beetle in the corner and names it dinner. You gently discourage that idea. Mainstream historical fact. Most peasant homes had no chimney, just a smoke hole in the roof. It worked. Poorly. The room would fill with smoke during winter as you tried to keep the fire going all day. It irritated the eyes, blackened the walls, and left your lungs feeling like you'd been chain-smoking bark. You stand up and pace a little, trying to get circulation back in your toes. The cold sneaks in everywhere. You've stuffed wool into the wall cracks, stacked straw against the door, and placed stones around the baseboards to stop drafts. But the chill is still there, persistent and smug. At night, it's even worse. The fire dies down unless someone tends it. Blankets only go so far. You and your family sleep close together, wrapped like medieval burritos in whatever fabrics you've managed to collect over the years. Quilts are rare. Real bedding? Even rarer. You sleep on straw or rushes, sometimes mixed with herbs like lavender if you're fancy. But mostly it's straw and fleas. Quirky tidbit time. It was common for villagers to sleep with animals indoors during winter. Not for fun, for body heat. Chickens, pigs, goats, whatever you've got. Nothing says sleepover like a snoring goat and a chicken perched on your toes. Cosy. And still, you shiver. Every joint aches. You wrap a bit of rag around your feet for extra padding. Maybe you even add a second cap to your head. The thing is, no matter how many layers you wear, the cold always finds you. It waits for you to stop moving, to stop paying attention. Then, bam, it creeps into your bones like a judgmental ghost. You hear someone sneezing in the corner. Again. It's the 4th time this morning. You say nothing, but your eyes meet someone else's across the room. That look says it all. If this turns into a winter cough, we are so doomed. Historians still argue whether peasant homes were truly as miserable as they're often portrayed. Some reconstructions suggest that with enough bodies, firewood, and ingenuity, they could actually be kind of warmish. But others say we've romanticised the resilience of the poor. After all, when your only insulation is last year's thatch and your socks are literally repurposed sleeves, there's only so much optimism to go around. There's a knock at the door. You don't actually want to open it, because opening it means letting out what little heat you've managed to trap. But you do. Slowly. Bracing for a gust of wind and possibly a flying chicken. It's Thomas from 2 huts over. He's wrapped in something that may once have been a rug. His beard is frosted and he's holding out a clay pot. Got extra stew, he mutters, blinking back icicles. This is what community means in winter. A half pot of lentils passed between households, a candle stub shared with a neighbour who ran out. You take the pot with cold hands and promise to return it with something in it soon. Probably not stew, maybe dried nettles and a prayer. You close the door and brace it again. Another gust rattles the wall. Your stomach growls again. Night comes early. You bank the fire with ash to keep it from dying out completely. You press your back to the wall and immediately regret it. It's like leaning against a stone coffin. There's no entertainment, no books, no screens, just the occasional story passed along in a low voice. And snoring, lots of snoring, and rats, and the sound of someone quietly weeping because their boots have frozen stiff. Welcome to winter in a thatched roof cottage. You made it through the day, that's something. It's still dark when you open your eyes. Not just early morning dark, more like, are we sure this isn't still midnight dark? But someone stirs beside you, and you know the time has come. Morning chores wait for no one, not even when your breath fogs the air like a dragon, and your toes feel more like rumours than body parts. You fumble for your tunic. It's damp, stiff with cold, and smells faintly of wet wool and goat. You yank it over your head anyway, wincing as it brushes against your frozen skin. Your boots, if you can call them that, are crusty with yesterday's mud. You shove your feet in and try not to scream. Socks? A luxury. Your current pair is really just a creatively tied rag collection. Someone hands you a crust of bread. Cold, hard, unbuttered. You chew it without comment. It's the medieval version of a protein bar. Barely food, just enough to keep you vertical. Outside, the world is silent under a fresh blanket of snow. Every sound is muffled, even your footsteps are hushed as you crunch across the icy yard toward the pen. The animals are waiting, and they don't care that you're tired, or that your hands are going numb. They need food, water, and de-icing. You sigh. Deeply. First up, the chickens. You unlatch the coop door and a wave of warmish ammonia air hits your face. It's foul, but it's warm, so you linger for a few seconds too long. The hens glare at you like you've slept in. You toss some feed, grains mixed with whatever scraps you could find yesterday, and check their water. It's frozen solid. Again. You crack the ice with a stick, toss it out, and replace it with water from the bucket you carried from the well, which, by the way, was also frozen. So your morning actually began with 15 minutes of hacking ice with a rusty tool while whispering a string of medieval curses under your breath. Next, the pig. His name is Edmund, and he is a menace. Edmund greets you with a loud grunt and tries to bite your foot, which is probably fair. You're late and he's hangry. You toss some spoiled cabbage and boiled grain into his trough. He snorts, satisfied. You wonder what it's like to be warm and unbothered. Fun historical fact, in winter peasants often kept their livestock as close to the living quarters as possible, sometimes literally in the house. Not just for convenience, but for warmth. Animal bodies radiate heat, not enough to roast chestnuts by, but enough to keep the air a few degrees above freezing. But still, outdoor chores were brutal. You scrape ice off the stable latch, fingers stiff and burning. Your breath feels like it's freezing in your lungs. The barn cat darts between your legs, looking smug. Of course she's warm. She sleeps in the hayloft. You try not to be jealous of a cat. The cow is your final stop. Her name is Beatrix. She moos at you mournfully, like she too questions all her life choices. You stroke her nose, which is warmer than your hands, and check her hooves for ice. Then you start the milking. Milking a cow in the dead of winter is a weird mix of horrible and meditative. The stool is cold, the bucket is colder, and your fingers feel like they're going to snap off. But the rhythm, the warmth of the animal, the soft sounds, it's strangely peaceful. For 10 minutes, you're not freezing or starving or worrying about next month's grain ration. You're just milking. The warm milk sloshes into the bucket, steam rising like magic. You sniff it. Pure gold. Later you'll heat it over the fire with a pinch of ground oats, a luxurious breakfast by winter standards. Quirky tidbit, some medieval folks believed milk had mystical properties in winter. It was thought to strengthen the blood and ward off illness. Some even mixed it with garlic and herbs to create tonics. Did it work? Debatable. Did it taste like medieval sadness? Probably. As you head back inside, the wind picks up. Snow begins to fall in lazy spirals. You pull your cloak tighter, even though it's more holes than cloth at this point. The cottage is still dim, the fire struggling. You rejoin the others and pass the milk to your aunt, who nods approvingly. She's already boiling water, the steam rising into the smoky air like a tiny miracle. You sit, you thaw. Your fingers tingle as the feeling slowly returns, a deeply unpleasant experience, like being stabbed by invisible bees. You rub your hands together and glance around at the rest of your family, all doing their best to pretend this is normal. Because it is. You hear someone outside. Thomas again, maybe. He's chopping wood. The sound echoes faintly. You admire him for still having the energy. Most mornings it feels like you're dragging your limbs through wet wool just to get dressed. Historians still argue whether winter was truly the dead time it's often described as in peasant life. While it certainly meant less agricultural work, there was no such thing as real rest. Every day required effort just to survive, but there was a different rhythm, a slower pace that crept in with the cold and stayed until the thaw. You lean back and let your eyes close for a moment. Just a moment. The chores are done. For now. The animals are fed. The water is no longer frozen. The cow has been milked. And even though your fingers still burn and your feet are probably growing icicles, you've made it through another winter morning. That counts. By midday you're already exhausted. But there's no time to rest, because winter isn't just about cold. It's about fuel. And you, my frostbitten friend, are running dangerously low on it. You glance at the fire. It's burning low, sulking in the hearth like it resents being alive. You prod it with a stick. It crackles in protest but refuses to come back to life. You sigh. Deeply. Because you know what this means. You have to go get more wood. Now this might sound simple enough to the modern mind. But in medieval peasant reality, gathering firewood in the dead of winter is basically a full-body punishment ritual with legal consequences. First, you bundle up. You layer on whatever scraps of clothing aren't currently occupied by someone else. A frayed cloak. A belt that used to belong to someone taller. An old linen shirt stuffed with straw for extra warmth. You look like someone who lost a wrestling match with a laundry pile. You trudge toward the forest with a dull hatchet and a heavy sense of dread. The snow crunches underfoot, then turns to sludge where other villagers have passed. The path is treacherous, slick, uneven, and definitely booby-trapped by tree roots you can't see under the snow. As you walk, your breath comes in heavy clouds, and your nose starts to run. You wipe it with the sleeve you've already used 4 times. Dignity left around the same time your last pair of dry socks did. You reach the tree line and glance around. The good wood is gone. Anything remotely easy to reach has been harvested weeks ago. What's left are wet, mossy branches and logs buried under snow. Still, you start chopping. Slowly. Awkwardly. Because you're not really cutting wood so much as negotiating with it. Fun historical fact. In many medieval villages, commoners weren't legally allowed to chop down live trees. Forests were usually controlled by local lords or monasteries, and cutting timber without permission could get you fined, or worse. So you're technically only allowed to gather deadwood. Dry branches, fallen logs, things that don't scream, "I used to be a tree." This law makes sense to exactly no one when it's 6 degrees, and your fingers are going numb. But you follow it anyway, mostly. You drag a bundle of kindling together and tie it with a frayed rope. Then you hoist it onto your back. It's heavier than you'd like, and the rope bites into your shoulders. Still, it's warmth, future heat, potential survival. You shuffle back through the woods, each step a slippery negotiation between balance and gravity. About halfway home, you hear something behind you. A rustle. Maybe a deer. Maybe a peasant who's lost it and turned feral. You don't stop to find out. You pick up the pace, which is difficult when your boots are 3/4 ice and 1/4 hope. Back in the village, a few neighbours nod as you pass. One older man is carrying his own wood bundle on a sled made from an old door. Another is cursing as his firewood pile collapses dramatically. You nod back. Mutual suffering builds strong friendships. You finally stagger into your cottage and dump the wood near the hearth. Someone mutters a thanks. Someone else immediately asks why it's all wet. You resist the urge to scream. You strip off your outer layers, most of which are now soaked, and settle by the fire again, feeding it with small bits of kindling. The fire slowly revives, sending up a thread of smoke and warmth. You bask in the glow like it's your firstborn child. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval folks believed certain types of wood carried spiritual properties. Hazel was thought to ward off evil. Ash burned cleanly. Oak was strong and long-lasting. Elm was just cursed, or just really smoky. Either way, you never trusted elm. Historians still argue whether peasants had designated fuel days during the week or simply scavenged when things got desperate. Records suggest some communities had organised firewood collection schedules, while others relied on whatever they could scrounge without getting caught by the local bailiff. And fire wasn't just about warmth. It was cooking, boiling water, making medicinal brews, drying out socks, lighting candles. Without it, your entire household grinds to a halt, so you guard that fire like it's sacred. You stoke it constantly, feed it slowly, and threaten anyone who leaves the door open too long. One ember at a time, you keep the cold at bay. As night creeps in again, because of course it does, you glance at the dwindling pile of wood. You'll need to go out again tomorrow, maybe twice, maybe farther into the woods. But for now the fire burns, and the room feels almost warm. You stretch your feet toward the flames, grateful for the sting of returning sensation. Your fingers tingle, your back aches. But you made it through another afternoon, another chore, another frostbitten hike. Outside the wind howls, inside the fire murmurs, and you, wrapped in smoke, wool and exhaustion, let yourself rest. You wake scratching, not dramatically, just enough to make you question every life choice that brought you to this particular moment. It's your ankle first, then your back, then that patch behind your ear that somehow always feels like it belongs to someone else's body in winter. Congratulations, you've got lice again. Honestly, you never didn't have lice, but they really like winter. The layers, the damp wool, the unwashed everything. It's basically a luxury resort for tiny parasites. And because you haven't bathed properly since Michaelmas, they're thriving. You, on the other hand, are not. You roll out of the communal bed pile, scratching the back of your head like you're trying to uncover treasure. Someone else groans nearby, probably experiencing the same itchy reality. You exchange glances. Nothing needs to be said. You're both human lint traps now. Clothing in winter is all about quantity, not style. You wrap yourself in 3 shirts, 2 tunics, and a cloak that smells like every bad decision you've ever made. Underneath it all, you've got a rough linen shift which, fun fact, was meant to be the washable layer. In theory, this layer absorbed your sweat, dirt, and lice, and could be cleaned more often than the outer layers. In theory, you grab your woolen hat, or what's left of it, and jam it onto your head. It doesn't help the itching, it does help keep your ears from freezing off. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval peasants layered up with linen and wool. Wool was warm and semi-water resistant, while linen was more breathable and less scratchy. But these materials were expensive and time-consuming to make, so most people had maybe 2 sets of clothes total, one on their body, one waiting its turn. If that. You glance at your sister, who's doing some kind of acrobatic manoeuvre trying to pull up wool hose without toppling over. The hose are baggy in the knees, tight at the ankles, and have probably been worn by 5 relatives before her. She finally wrangles them on and lets out a triumphant sigh. You both look vaguely like bundles of rags brought to life by frustration and the need for warmth. Quirky detail incoming. Many medieval people believed that lice were simply a fact of life, a punishment for sin or a natural side effect of being alive. There wasn't much shame in having them, until they got bad enough that your scalp bled. Then people started edging away. To deal with them, some villagers would sit near the fire and roast their clothing, not to dry them, to cook out the lice. You've done this too. You throw your shirt onto a flat stone near the hearth and watch with morbid satisfaction as the heat makes the tiny squatters jump ship. The smell? Earthy, slightly horrifying, but better than constant itching. Historians still argue whether medieval hygiene practices were truly as dismal as popular media suggests. Bathing wasn't unheard of, even in peasant communities, but during winter, water froze and privacy vanished. And hot baths? Reserved for nobles or the extremely lucky. You, unfortunately, are neither. Your hair, once something you were sort of proud of, now resembles a tangled bramble. You finger comb it with the grace of someone trying to separate threads with oven mitts. No comb, no brush, just your nails and a lot of grunting. You pour a tiny bit of warmed vinegar onto a cloth, an old remedy passed down by your grandmother. You dab it on your scalp, wincing at the sting. Does it work? Maybe. Or maybe you just enjoy the illusion of doing something. You look around and take stock of your household's winter fashion parade. Everyone is layered, lumpy, and vaguely the same colour. Brown. Everything you own is some shade of brown, grey, or dirt. That's not a poetic metaphor. That's just the colour palette of survival. And despite the layers, everyone is cold. Always cold. The wind sneaks in under sleeves and up tunics like a mischievous spirit. Your uncle has tied a length of fabric around his knees like a scarf. He says it keeps the ache away. Your aunt wears mittens made from leftover goat hide. They smell like wet socks and despair. There's no soap, not the way you'd think of it anyway. Maybe a bar of lye-based something if someone traded for it months ago. More likely, you use ash and sand to scrub your hands and rinse with snowmelt. It's not pretty, but it gets the grime off. Sort of. The itch returns, you scratch again, your cousin throws a twig at you. Stop, he says. You're making me feel it too. You stick your tongue out. It's a good moment to remember that dignity and winter are not friends. The truth is, clothes are your armour, but they're also your burden. You can't afford to take anything off, even when you're sweating by the fire, because as soon as you do, you'll freeze. And getting warm again takes hours, maybe never. So you sit wrapped in wool surrounded by the soft symphony of scratching. You roast your sleeves by the fire, you whisper threats at your hat, and you wonder, just briefly, what it might feel like to wear something new, clean, uninfested. But that's a spring thought. Right now, you pull your cloak tighter and brace for another day of chilly layers and very personal space sharing with creatures you never invited. You're still alive and moderately dressed. Good enough. The stew is familiar, which is a polite way of saying it's the exact same thing you ate yesterday, the day before that, and probably last Tuesday. You stare into the wooden bowl, watching a tired carrot chunk float past a dried pea. The broth is a thin greyish-brown, flecked with unidentifiable herbs and what might be a hair. You don't ask whose. Someone stirs the pot over the hearth, careful not to let it burn. Again. Because if it does, the whole room smells like regret and char. The fire spits a little as another log is added, and the air thickens with the smell of boiled onion and smoke. It's the signature scent of winter cuisine. Hot, barely salted, and deeply unsatisfying. You take a bite. It's warm. That's the nicest thing you can say. Meals like this were common for peasants during winter. Simple, repetitive, and built around survival. Your stew today is a humble pottage, a medieval staple. Basically, it's a thick soup of whatever's available. Root vegetables, beans, maybe some grains, occasionally meat if you're wildly lucky. And if it's meat, it's probably bacon rind, not a glorious roast. Mainstream historical fact. Pottage was the go-to meal for centuries. Cheap, filling, and flexible. It simmered all day over the fire, stretching meagre ingredients into something almost nutritious. And no one really complained, because there weren't other options. You swallow another spoonful and consider whether it's slightly better or worse than yesterday. Worse, maybe. But it's hard to tell when your tongue has gone numb from sheer boredom. Your cousin tries to be creative. She sprinkles in dried nettle from the bundle over the hearth. Someone else adds a splash of sour ale. It still tastes like despair, but now with floral notes. Quirky tidbit. Some people believed the longer a stew simmered, the healthier it became. In fact, there are records of medieval households keeping the same pot going for weeks, adding fresh ingredients as others disappeared. It wasn't just food. It was a perpetual cauldron of family history and boiled leeks. You try not to think about how many hands have stirred this stew. You definitely don't think about what fell in when no one was looking. The flavour is stable. Suspiciously so. There's an occasional treat, though. A shriveled apple. A dried plum saved from the fall. But those are rare. Treasures doled out like tiny miracles. Someone unwraps a lump of hard cheese, proudly places it on the table, and everyone stares at it like it's the crown jewels. You each get a sliver. The taste is sharp, salty, and glorious. You try to chew slowly. You fail. Historians still argue whether peasant diets were actually bad by modern standards. Nutritionally speaking, many peasants got decent calories and vitamins from legumes, turnips, and onions. But the monotony, crushing. You can only eat so many tubers before your soul quietly shuts the door and walks away. The stew gets ladled out again for supper. No one's excited, but no one refuses. Hunger is a great equalizer. You eat, sip weak ale, and listen to the fire crackle. Outside, the snow continues to fall in soft sheets. Someone starts humming. A child sneezes. The room smells like boiled cabbage and people. You pretend not to notice. After the meal, the pot is rinsed out with hot water, carefully, sparingly. Water is precious, especially in winter when fetching it means cracking ice and hauling buckets that weigh more than your optimism. You clean your bowl with a scrap of bread. That's dessert. You lean back against the wall and close your eyes. Your stomach is warm, if not full. The food was bland, if not bad. The stew, thin and watery as it is, carries you through another evening without collapse. That's enough. And if you're lucky, maybe tomorrow someone finds a beat that isn't completely hollow. The stuff of dreams. It starts with a cough. A quiet one, buried beneath the usual creaks of the floorboards and murmurs by the fire. Then another, deeper, from the other side of the room. Someone groans. Someone else reaches for a rag to press to their forehead. You don't say anything, but you feel your stomach twist. Winter illness has arrived. You sit up straighter on your wooden stool, suddenly aware of how close everyone is, how shared the air feels, how heavy the air smells. There's no such thing as personal space in a one-room hut. Everyone breathes the same stale smoke and onion-laced stew vapour. If someone's sick, you all are. It's just a matter of time. There's no doctor to call, no clinic, no medicine. Well, nothing you'd recognise as medicine. There's a woman 2 doors down named Agnes who knows how to make teas from bark and berries. Some call her a healer. Others call her strange things behind her back. But when people start coughing up blood, they go knocking on her door like she's the Queen of England. Your aunt is already steeping something in a blackened kettle. Water, a few crumpled leaves, a pinch of dried root that smells like feet. She hands it to your brother, who sips with the enthusiasm of someone drinking warm pond water. "It's good for the humours," she says. You don't ask which humours. Mainstream historical fact. Medical care for peasants in the medieval period was a mix of folk remedies, herbal traditions, and deeply misunderstood theories of the body. The dominant idea, balancing your 4 humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too much phlegm? You are probably cold and moist. A slice of ginger might fix you. You offer to help by rinsing cloths in hot water. One has a strange greenish stain. You pretend not to notice. Everyone in the room is a little paler than yesterday. The fire flickers weakly. Even it seems worried. It's not just the coughs now. One of the children has a fever, red-faced, whimpering, and curled into a ball under 3 layers of wool. Your aunt rubs goose grease on the child's chest and mutters something in Latin-sounding gibberish. She doesn't know what it means. Neither do you. But it feels like the right thing to do. Quirky tidbit. Goose fat was a go-to remedy for just about everything, from chest colds to chapped lips, rubbed on the skin, mixed with herbs, even swallowed in desperation. It was the medieval equivalent of Vicks Vapor Rub, only greasier, and definitely more goose. You glance at the corner of the room, the herb shelf, where dried bundles hang like fragrant bats, sage for sore throats, lavender for nerves, wormwood for stomach cramps. You chew a bit of yarrow because someone once told you it helps keep your blood strong. It tastes like bitter regret. Historians still argue whether peasant communities had effective systems of care or simply muddled through winter illness with prayers and trial and error. Some records show local women keeping careful herb lore, passing it down through generations. Others suggest entire villages could be wiped out by a single outbreak of flu-like symptoms. Tonight the room smells like sweat, smoke and rosemary. You wipe another forehead, toss another soiled rag into the bucket, and try to remember what day it is. Time blurs in sickness. Everything slows. There are fewer jokes, fewer complaints, just coughing, hushed voices, and the occasional cry. Someone suggests a poultice, someone else says we should hang garlic from the ceiling beams to ward off evil air. You do both. Because why not? You think about Agnes. You saw her once rubbing mouldy bread into a wound. She called it penicillin's grandmother. You don't know what that means, but the person she was treating didn't die. So maybe she's onto something. You finally crawl back into the bedding, surrounded by bodies shifting restlessly. You wrap yourself tight and tuck the wool over your mouth. You try not to breathe too deeply. You pray to whatever saints are listening that your lungs stay clear. There's one last cough before sleep, a deep, wet one. Tomorrow, you'll go visit Agnes. The ground is hard. Not like, oops, I stubbed my toe hard. More like, if you fall on this, your soul leaves your body hard. You're standing in the village's burial field, holding a spade that's about as useful as a spoon right now. The frost has turned the earth into iron. And there's a body wrapped in linen behind you, lying silently beside a rough wooden plank. You swallow. It's not your first winter funeral and it won't be your last. But this one hurts more than usual. He was young. He'd only just turned 13. The fever got him fast, quicker than anyone expected. A small group has gathered, huddled in cloaks and furs and grief. No one talks much. The priest mutters the usual words. His breath fogs in the air like a passing ghost. Someone coughs. Someone else weeps quietly. And the ground doesn't give. You take a swing with the spade. It bounces off the dirt with a hollow thunk. Everyone knows it's pointless. So instead of a burial, you do what's been done before, what everyone does when the ground refuses to open. You carry him, gently, to the shed. The shed isn't for tools anymore, not in winter. It's for holding. Bodies specifically. You're not supposed to say it aloud, but everyone knows. Covered in snowdrifts, it looks peaceful. Inside, it's still and cold and quiet. A makeshift crypt with straw on the floor and cloth-covered bundles laid respectfully in rows. You lay him down, cross yourself. Say nothing. Mainstream historical fact. In regions with severe winters, frozen ground often made traditional burials impossible until spring. Churches and villages developed holding places, charnel houses, ossuaries, or simple sheds, to store the deceased until proper rites could be completed. It was practical and grim. You return to the cottage with red eyes and icy fingers. No one greets you. Everyone is subdued. The fire crackles like it knows better than to make noise. Your aunt hands you a cup of warm ale. You nod. That's thanks enough. There's a strange peace that follows death in winter. Life doesn't stop, but it softens. People speak slower. Chores get done, but without the usual chatter. Food is eaten, but no one mentions the taste. You sit near the hearth and pull your blanket close. The wind howls outside, shaking the shutters. You watch a single snowflake land on the window's wooden edge, then melt away. Temporary beauty, gone in seconds. Quirky tidbit. Some villagers believed the dead could hear winter winds, that their souls, not yet at rest, listened as loved ones whispered memories or apologies. Superstition? Maybe. But on nights like this, with the shadows long and the room too quiet, you almost believe it. Historians still argue how much personal mourning was permitted or expected among peasants. Some evidence suggests strong community support after a death, shared meals, candlelit vigils, informal wakes. Other records point to more reserved, pragmatic responses. Grief was a luxury for the well-fed. The rest had chores. Tonight, no one does chores. Not really. Someone tosses a log on the fire. Someone turns a wheel of yarn without much focus. Your cousin hums a song under their breath, an old lullaby that's more sigh than melody. You think about him, his laugh, the way he used to kick snow at you when you weren't looking, the argument you had about who had to clean the privy last week, the fact that you never got to say sorry. You shift, blink hard, and rub your sleeve against your cheek. You're not the only one doing it. Sleep comes, eventually. Uneasy, fitful. You dream of frozen fields and sun-warmed soil, of deep roots and thawed earth, of the promise that someday, maybe in a few weeks, maybe longer, you'll come back to that hill. With shovels that bite, not bounce, with flowers, with a proper goodbye. For now, though, you wait. There's something different in the air this morning, something warm, sweet, and entirely out of place in the middle of winter. You sniff, again, harder. It's not cabbage. It's not wood smoke. It's bread. Real bread. You bolt upright, nearly knocking over the toddler sleeping beside you like a sack of flour. Across the room, your aunt is pulling something from the hearth oven. Round, golden, slightly scorched, but unmistakably a loaf. You blink twice. Either this is a dream, or it's finally time for Christmas. Not that you are counting down the days, because there's no calendar nailed to the wall and no radio playing carols, but you've been tracking the sun, the frost, and your aunt's slow transformation into don't talk to me before the feast mode. You know the signs. Today is special. Sort of. It's not the twinkle light snowflake sweater kind of Christmas. It's more like, here, have a slightly larger piece of boiled turnip and some weak beer kind of Christmas. But it's still something. And in winter, something is everything. Mainstream historical fact. Christmas was one of the few moments in the medieval peasant calendar when hard labour paused and food flowed more freely, if only briefly. The 12 days of Christmas, yes, those ones, marked a festive season of prayer, Feasting and social rules turned upside down. Lords fed labourers. Peasants drank beer at sunrise. Even pigs got an extra handful of grain. Your cousin sneaks over and tears a chunk off the loaf. No one yells. In fact, your aunt hands out more. The bread is dense and dark, sweetened with a drizzle of honey saved for months. You chew slowly, savouring the slight crunch of the crust, the warmth in your hands. A crumb falls. You rescue it. Waste not. Someone pours ale into a shared mug and passes it around. It's weak, sour and lukewarm, but it's got a hint of apple in it. You can almost taste joy. Today, people are smiling. Not broadly, not carelessly, but enough. Your uncle sings something with words half forgotten and the others join in, mumbling along. The tune is ancient and a little off-key, but it echoes through the cottage like a candle flickering against cold stone. You pull on your cloak. Yes, that cloak, the one that smells like a barn and once doubled as a blanket for a goat, and head outside. The village looks the same, but different. Snow still piles against the fences. The wind still bites. But everywhere you look, people are carrying loaves, clinking mugs, exchanging bundles of dried fruit or spice. A rare, brief marketplace has bloomed, even in this frozen world. You meet Thomas near the well. He gives you a meat pie. You stare at it like it's made of gold. He shrugs. My wife burned the first 3. This one's only half black. You trade him a dried apple and 3 cloves. He raises his eyebrows at the cloves. Showing off, are we? You grin. You are. Quirky tidbit. Medieval peasants often exchange gifts during Christmas. Modest things like spices, thread, carved buttons or scraps of cloth. The idea wasn't grandeur, it was connection. And sometimes people got especially bold and swapped things they'd made themselves, embroidery, tools, or loaves shaped like animals. It was weird. It was wonderful. Back home the stew pot is bubbling, but this time it smells good. Someone added a bone with a bit of meat still clinging to it, a few dried herbs, a hint of real salt. The children are chasing each other with pine branches, pretending to be forest sprites. You let them. Everyone's allowed a little nonsense today. Your aunt hands you a candle stub, a real beeswax one. She lights it, and the scent fills the room, soft, golden, warm. Don't waste it, she says, but don't hoard it either. You nod and watch the flame. It flickers like it knows it doesn't belong in this world, but it's going to glow anyway. Historians still argue how widely festive customs spread among rural peasants. Some suggest most villages observed only the bare minimum of church-mandated celebrations. Others point to songs, food traditions, and even masked revelry as proof of a richer, more chaotic celebration. Likely it varied from region to region, just like everything else. That night the house is full. People squeeze in, elbows bumping, plates passing back and forth. Someone plays a pipe, poorly, but with passion. There's laughter. Even the goats seem content. You sit by the fire, stomach full for once, listening to stories about long-gone winters and ghostly visitors who bless households with bread and frost. You're not sure what's real and what's drunk nostalgia, but you don't care. The stories are warm. That's enough. Later, wrapped in your usual cocoon of cloaks and coughs, you listen to the final embers popping in the hearth. The air is still cold, the roof still leaks, and tomorrow will still be hard. But for one glorious day there was bread, beer and light. And in winter that's everything. There's a cow staring at you. Not from across the yard, not from behind a fence, but from roughly 2 feet away, her enormous damp nose fogging up the corner of the blanket you're clinging to like it's your last hope on earth. Her breath is warm. That's the good news. The bad news, she's farting. Rhythmically. You sigh. Loudly. She blinks at you. This is your life now. You and your cow, Beatrix, proud producer of lukewarm milk and general barnyard chaos, are winter roommates. Along with a few chickens, a goat named Ada who bites ankles, and your entire extended family. Welcome to a barn sharing, the medieval peasant's answer to central heating. It's not because you particularly want to sleep with livestock. It's because in winter you do what you must to stay alive. And sometimes that means pushing the furniture back, laying down straw, and inviting the cow inside. Mainstream historical fact. During especially cold winters, medieval peasants often moved animals indoors to conserve heat. The animal's body warmth helped warm the shared space, especially in single-room homes. It was noisy, smelly, and probably chaotic, but it worked. Mostly. You shift under the blankets and adjust the straw-stuffed bolster beneath your neck. Somewhere nearby, your cousin sneezes. Somewhere else, a hen lays an egg and immediately squawks like she's won a tournament. You murmur a half-hearted congrats and try to go back to sleep. But Beatrix isn't done. She takes a step closer, her hooves thudding softly on the packed earth floor, and then she does it. She licks your forehead. A long, slow, squelchy swipe of bovine affection. "Thank you," you whisper. "I feel seen." Your cousin snorts from the bedding pile. "She licked Maud last night too." "Maybe she's trying to cure us," someone else mutters. You all laugh, quietly, the way people do when the alternative is crying. Quirky tidbit. Some folk beliefs actually held that sleeping near certain animals, especially cows, could draw out illness or keep evil spirits at bay. Whether you believed that or not, the reality was simple. Your cow produced heat, and heat meant life, the smell. You stop noticing it after a few days. The cow smell, the chicken smell, the human smell, it all merges into one vaguely sour scent that clings to the walls and seeps into your soul. It's the perfume of winter survival. Eau de peasant. You rise before dawn to sweep out the worst of the manure. It's not glamorous, but it has to be done. The air inside is thick, humid with breath and condensation. Your breath joins the others, rising in clouds. Somewhere in the loft above, a mouse scurries. Maybe two. They live here too, of course. You shovel waste into a bucket and toss it into the compost heap outside, moving quickly before the cold can eat through your bones. The morning sky is pale grey. The snow is crusted over with a layer of ice. You can hear it crunch and splinter under your feet. It sounds like frozen parchment. Back inside, the animals are munching breakfast. The goat has somehow found a bit of linen to chew. You retrieve it before she swallows. It's your sister's sleeve. Probably. Beatrix gazes at you again with those huge eyes. She's chewing slowly, thoughtfully. You could swear she's judging your life choices. Historians still argue whether the integration of livestock into human living spaces was widespread, or more of a response to emergency conditions. Some suggest that for the poorest families, shared spaces were simply the default year-round. Others believe it was a calculated seasonal choice, balancing warmth, sanitation, and space. Either way, you and your cow are now emotionally bonded. You pat her flank and pour a bit of warm mash into her trough. She responds with a soft moo. You pretend it means thank you. You pretend a lot of things these days. That evening, as the wind howls and sleet hammers the roof, you wrap your arms around your knees and let the combined warmth of animals and people soak into your skin. The fire glows, the air is thick, the goat is snoring. Your sister is humming softly while fixing a hole in her sock. Beatrix lets out a gentle lowing sound. It's oddly comforting. You look around and realise something surprising. You're not just surviving. You're part of a strange living quilt of warmth and breath and fur and wool and family. And somehow it's enough. You'll sleep well tonight. With a cow at your side and frost on the windows, you jolt awake in the pitch dark, heart pounding, not sure why. Then you hear it. A soft hiss. A whisper of silence where there should be crackling. You scramble upright, knocking into your cousin, who groans and mutters something unprintable in medieval peasant speak. The fire has gone out. Panic hits you faster than the cold. There's nothing quite like the quiet dread of a dead hearth in the middle of a medieval winter night. You fumble for the fire-poking stick with the urgency of someone who knows that without heat everything gets worse. Fast. The embers are still faintly glowing, barely, but they're there. Thank every saint and mildly helpful forest spirit. You grab the kindling bundle and blow gently, the way your aunt showed you, cheeks puffing and face dangerously close to setting your eyebrows on fire. A few sparks flicker. You add a splinter of wood, then another. It catches. You want to cry from relief. Keeping the fire alive is a nightly ritual, a sacred task handed off in hushed tones before bed. Don't let it die. You draw ash over it before sleep, banking it just enough to keep it smouldering. But tonight, someone misjudged. Or maybe the wood was too wet. Either way, it almost died. And if it had, you'd be freezing now, and tomorrow would be worse. Mainstream historical fact. In homes without chimneys, fires were kept burning day and night, not just for heat, but for cooking, light, and even spiritual protection. Restarting a fire from scratch was difficult without flint or tinder boxes, and the loss of flame could delay meals, risk sickness, or even death in extreme cold. Your aunt joins you now, rubbing her eyes and wrapping a cloak around her shoulders. She stokes the fire gently, methodically, like she's calming a wild animal. The glow returns, golden and sleepy. Warmth crawls back across the room. She nods at you. Good work. That's the highest praise you're getting today. You sit near the fire watching it dance. Everyone else is still asleep, tangled in wool and dreams and goat breath. But you stay up a little longer, watching the flames like they might tell you something. There's a kind of hypnosis to it. The rhythm, the soft pop, the fluttering shadows. It draws you in, slows your thoughts. You breathe deeper, even with the cow's tail flicking dangerously close to the kindling. Then comes the ritual, checking the wood pile. You count each piece like it's coin. You rearrange them by size, fat logs for later, skinny ones for now, bark bundles for emergencies. You run your fingers over each one, judging its dryness. You're part woodsman, part accountant, and full-time paranoid firekeeper. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval households treated fire as a living spirit. In certain regions it was bad luck to curse or argue in front of the hearth. Others whispered blessings when adding the first spark of the morning. You don't exactly believe it, but you catch yourself muttering, "Please stay lit," more often than you'd admit. Historians still argue whether fire maintenance fell more heavily on men, women or children in peasant households. Some evidence suggests the task rotated, while other accounts place it squarely on the youngest, who are nimble enough to move between sleeping bodies and alert enough to wake early. Congratulations, tonight, that's you. The fire is healthy again. The room brightens slightly. People stir. The goat sneezes. You yawn so hard it hurts. But you smile. You saved the hearth. It doesn't earn you a statue, but it earns you breakfast first, and that's something. You throw in a few damp twigs to dry by the edge of the hearth and settle back onto your straw pile. You wrap yourself in your cloak, still warm from fire duty, and let your eyes drift closed. Later, someone else will take the next watch. Or maybe they won't. You're always a little unsure. But for now, the fire burns. The shadows retreat. And you, guardian of the flame, master of the midnight panic, finally drift back to sleep with your face warmed by flickering light. The snow still blocks the door, so you kick it open with one boot while balancing a basket in the other hand. The door groans like it resents your audacity. Cold rushes in, sharp, disrespectful, and eager to remind you who's in charge around here. But you're not going out. Not today. Because today the storm is too heavy, the roads are gone, and the outside world might as well be the moon. So, you pivot, slam the door shut with your hip, and accept your fate. It's a full day of indoor chores. And yes, somehow they're even worse than outdoor ones. You sit cross-legged near the hearth and grab your drop spindle, your least favourite companion. It's an unforgiving little stick of wood that demands patience, dexterity, and eternal optimism. You have none of these, but you start spinning wool anyway, pulling raw tufts into thin strands, twisting them, winding them, cursing quietly under your breath. Mainstream historical fact. During winter, indoor activities like spinning wool, mending tools, carving handles, weaving baskets, and repairing clothes became the backbone of peasant productivity. Women spun thread almost constantly. Even men, when not dealing with firewood or animals, contributed by crafting tools or fixing whatever had recently broken. Read everything. Your hands ache. The wool keeps breaking. You lick your fingers to try again. It tastes like soot and goat. Across the room, your uncle is fixing a rake handle. He doesn't need the rake until spring, but winter is when you fix things, because spring won't wait for you. His hands are thick and scarred, moving slowly but surely over the wood. Every now and then he grumbles at it. You think he's talking to the rake. Your aunt is weaving a basket, muttering to herself and poking children who are trying to nap near the warmest corner of the room. Don't sleep now. Spin something. Sew something. Be useful. One of them groans dramatically. You nod in solidarity. You all keep going, working in near silence except for the occasional creak of wood or the snap of a misbehaving thread. Then the goat gets inside the basket your aunt was weaving. It becomes a brief, hilarious battle of wills. The goat wins. Again, you laugh. Everyone does. just a little, because when you're trapped inside for days or weeks, everything starts to feel like a test. A test of your patience, your willpower, your ability to do the same task 20 times without snapping and feeding the spindle to the fire. Quirky tidbit. In some villages, spinning was so crucial that women were buried with their spindles, and in certain superstitions, a restless spirit could only be calmed if her unfinished wool was finally spun. Somewhere out there, someone's ghost is still waiting on their great-great-granddaughter to finish a sleeve. You stretch, your knees pop like firewood. The drop spindle rolls under a stool and mocks you from the shadows. You pretend not to care. Your cousin is scraping old wax off a candlestick, trying to combine enough stubs to make a new one. You watch him press the bits together with grim determination. He lights it briefly, and the smell is faintly sweet. Beeswax. A luxury. You all lean in to sniff it, like it's a dessert. Outside, the wind picks up again, rattling the shutters like it's trying to get in. The animals shift restlessly. Beatrix lets out a long, soulful moo. She's bored too. Historians still argue whether indoor labour was shared equally among family members or distributed by age, skill and gender. Some suggest strict roles, women spinning, men mending tools. Others point to a more flexible arrangement, especially in smaller households. In winter, work was work. Whoever could do it, did. You pick up a worn shirt and start mending a hole. The needle is bent, the thread is the wrong colour. But it's better than sitting idle. That's when the bad thoughts creep in. The hunger, the boredom, the memory of someone's last cough. You sew slowly, clumsily. Your aunt gives you a look, not critical, just knowing. First shirt I ever fixed, she says. I sewed the sleeves shut. You both chuckle. Evening arrives like a lazy cat curling into the corners of the room. The spinning slows, the mending stops. Someone starts heating up the same stew you've eaten for a week. The drop spindle sits forgotten beside the hearth. You glare at it one last time before turning your back. You worked. You stayed busy. You didn't lose your mind. That counts. The mud is back. You open the door and it stares at you. Thick, glistening, defiant. The snow is melting, sort of, but it hasn't gone quietly. Instead, it's mixed with the thawed manure, old ash, hay scraps, and whatever that is in the corner. It's not spring. Not really. It's just the very first, very damp step towards something that might become spring. You breathe in. The air smells like wet wood, damp straw, and the faintest hint of life. Not flowers, not yet, but something else. Not death. And that's a noticeable improvement. You step outside, boots sinking with a wet slurp. The village looks soggy and exhausted. Roofs drip steadily. Icicles plop into puddles. Fences lean under the weight of half-melted snow, like they've had too much to drink. But people are smiling. A little. Their noses are still red and their fingers still cracked, but they walk differently, less hunched. There's sunlight, pale and uncertain, peeking through the grey, and everyone's pretending not to notice how loud the birds are. You squint at the trees. The tips of the branches look greener, maybe, or maybe your brain is just starved for colour. Either way, it lifts something inside you. Mainstream historical fact. March and early April were the traditional hungry months for medieval peasants. The final stretch of winter when food stores were critically low, but the fields weren't yet producing anything new. It was a liminal space between survival and hope. You look around at the people emerging from their huts like cautious hedgehogs. Someone's clearing debris from the path. Someone else is hanging out damp blankets in a sliver of sunshine. Children splash in a puddle and get shouted at by 4 adults at once. You smile. Your cousin points toward the fields. Time to check the damage. You groan, but you follow. The fields are a mess. The furrows are filled with slush and ice-crusted water. The scarecrow has collapsed in defeat. A crow perches on its arm like it's claiming victory. You glare at the crow. It glares back. You lose. You poke the soil with a stick. It's soggy, but not frozen. That's something. Later you'll try turning it with a wooden hoe. Not today. Today is reconnaissance. Quirky tidbit. In some communities, people mark the first day of thaw with a strange ritual, sweeping out the house backward or placing a coin under a patch of melting snow to bless the dirt. It didn't make much sense, but in March, people would do anything to convince themselves they had control over something. You gather a few early greens, dandelion leaves mostly. They're bitter but edible. You tuck them into a cloth with surprising reverence. Your sister finds a single garlic shoot. She clutches it like it's the Holy Grail. Back at the cottage, you scrape off your boots with a stick, again, and add your forage treasures to the pot. Tonight's stew will taste like something. Not much, but not nothing. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants celebrated the thaw with actual rituals or if the arrival of spring was simply folded into the larger liturgical calendar. It probably varied. But either way, people noticed, people cared, because winter was long, and surviving it wasn't guaranteed. You hang your cloak on a peg to dry. It drips steadily, forming a small puddle that the goat immediately steps in. She looks at you like it's your fault. You sigh. You sit by the fire, not for warmth now, but because it's habit. The room feels less heavy. There's more light in the doorway, more air in the rafters. Someone is humming. Later you'll go check the stream for thawed spots. Maybe set a net for fish. Maybe check the traps again. Maybe even see green moss on the stones. For now, you sip your stew and smile, because it smells a little like garlic, and it doesn't taste like despair. You're still chewing your breakfast, a cold hunk of rye bread that requires a heroic jaw effort, when you hear the sound that turns everyone's stomach faster than undercooked porridge. Hooves, not your cow, not the neighbour's goat. This is the clop of an official's horse, and sure enough, there he is, the reeve. Cloak blowing dramatically in the breeze, ledger tucked under one arm, expression carved from ancient disappointment. He's smiling, but only with his teeth. That's never a good sign. You don't wave, no one does, because today is tax day. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval villages, taxes weren't paid in neat coinage by peasants. You paid in grain, in eggs, in chickens, in what little you managed to keep alive during the winter. And the reeve, he was the local collector, part administrator, part snitch, all trouble. Even if he was from your village, he now worked for the man who owned your village. You gather your things quietly, a sack of barley, a few onions, one sad chicken that you've definitely named but are pretending you haven't. The others do the same, silent procession of the barely surviving. The reeve waits in the middle of the green next to a cart pulled by a sour-looking donkey. It already contains several sacks of grain, a bundle of wool, and something wrapped in cloth that may once have been cheese. Possibly. You approach. The reeve opens his ledger with exaggerated ceremony. "Ah," he says, not looking up. "Family of Oswin the Elder, still alive, I see." Your aunt glares. Your cousin coughs. You say nothing. One by one he inspects your offerings. He weighs the barley. He prods the onions. He lifts the chicken, sniffs, then grunts approvingly. Not bad. Bit light, though. You clench your jaw. So does your aunt. But she adds a half loaf of rye to the pile. He smiles again. There now. Fair's fair. Quirky tidbit. Some peasants tried to cheat the system, filling sacks with sand under a layer of grain, or fattening chickens with stones in their crop. It occasionally worked, until the reeve figured it out and tacked on penalties like taking your tools or shaming you in front of the entire village. You stand back, arms crossed, watching as your week's worth of food trundles away in the cart. It's not just your family. Every household pays. Some are lucky, better stores, better land. Some aren't. You catch sight of a neighbour crying quietly. She hands over her only hen. Her children look on with hollow eyes. Historians still argue whether medieval taxation was genuinely exploitative or just a necessary evil in an economy that lacked cash flow. Some lords were relatively lenient, especially after a harsh winter. Others saw suffering as a motivation tool. Regardless, the reeve always got his share. After the collection, the reeve makes a little speech. Something about the generosity of the manor and how we're all in this together. You nod politely, then you go home and scream into a turnip. Later, as you return to your chores, the absence of what you gave up feels loud. There's a space in the corner where the chicken used to cluck. The grain sacks sit lighter. The pot of stew is already missing what you planned to add, but the house is still standing, the fire is still lit, your family is still breathing, and you didn't punch the reeve. So, all in all, not the worst tax day. You squelch. Every step through the newly thawed field is a slow, slurping ordeal, your boots nearly swallowed by the thick, sticky mud of early spring. Your hoe clunks against a stone. You curse under your breath, not even creatively anymore, just tired syllables directed at the earth, the sky, the entire concept of weather. Your cousin groans beside you. "Why do we even do this?" he asks, flicking a gob of muck off his cloak. "To eat," your aunt replies flatly, already 5 rows ahead and swinging her hoe like she means it. Because like it or not, it's time to wake the fields again. Mainstream historical fact. As soon as the ground was soft enough, medieval peasants began the back-breaking work of re-preparing their fields. This meant clearing debris, turning soil and spreading manure, all by hand, often while still weakened from winter shortages. The survival of the rest of the year depended on what you did right now. You dig into the clods with a grunt, turning soil that's equal parts mud and memory. The frost has retreated, but not far, and the earth is slow to cooperate. The smell is a pungent blend of rot, manure, and new beginnings. Someone nearby starts singing a planting song. You don't know the words, but you hum along just to stay sane. At the edge of the field, a pair of oxen strain under a crude wooden plough. It's groaning louder than they are. The ploughman, shirt off despite the cold, shouts encouragement, or curses. It's hard to tell. Every now and then the blade catches on a root, jerks sideways, and threatens to split the entire contraption. You wince every time. Your hands blister, your back aches, but you keep digging. Spring planting is community work. You're not alone out here. Everyone's returned to the fields. Mothers, sons, grandmothers with knotted fingers and stubborn shoulders. Even the children are gathering stones, tossing them aside like tiny muddy gods of agriculture. Your family works in grim silence. It's not sadness, it's focus. Hunger is a sharper motivator than hope. Quirky tidbit. In some regions, villagers performed rituals to wake the land after winter. They'd sing to the fields, walk the boundaries barefoot, or even offer a spoon of last year's flour to the earth as a sort of bribe. You've never done that, but today you do accidentally drop a bit of old stew in the furrow. Close enough. Your aunt finds the first earthworm of the season. She holds it up like a relic. "The soil's good," she says. Everyone murmurs approval. Worms mean fertile earth, and fertile earth means, maybe, enough turnips this year that you don't have to fight over them. Historians still argue how effective medieval agricultural methods really were. The heavy plough was a game-changer in the right soil, but it took serious animal power to use. In poorer villages, people made do with hand tools, shared oxen, or communal ploughing days, where the whole village tackled one field at a time like a muddy festival of effort. Around midday, someone passes around weak ale. You gulp it greedily. It's slightly sour, slightly warm, and entirely perfect. You wipe your mouth and go back to digging. The sun peeks through the clouds for a few glorious minutes. Everyone pauses to lift their faces and squint at it like it's a visitor from a forgotten dream. By evening, your boots are twice their original weight and your knees refuse to bend properly. But the field? It looks different. It looks alive. The furrows stretch like tired smiles across the landscape. It's not much yet, but it's the beginning. You trudge home covered in mud, stinking of sweat and fresh soil. You collapse onto the bench by the hearth and stretch your legs out with a groan. Someone hands you a bowl of stew. It tastes the same as always, but tonight it feels like fuel. Because tomorrow you do it all again, and the next day, and the next, until seeds go in and green things, real green things, start to rise from the ground like a promise you forgot you made. You're sore, you're tired, but you're here, digging into the earth and dragging life back out of it. And that somehow feels like a miracle. The air feels different now, lighter but somehow heavier with worry. The warmth of the thaw has brought new life and new threats. You glance around nervously. Something's not right. Within days of the first green shoots, the village is hit with a wave of spring fevers. It's as if the cold didn't want to release you, and now it's sending a final nasty message. People start coughing again. Weakness spreads through the homes like a shadow. Faces flush bright red, then pale. Limbs ache. Mothers cradle children who whimper softly and refuse food. You bite your lip and try to keep your distance, but the sickness finds everyone anyway. No one understands why it comes, or why some survive while others don't. Maybe it's the sudden change in temperature. Maybe the mud carries invisible invaders. Maybe it's the old spirits, angry that winter's grip has slipped. Mainstream historical fact. Epidemics of respiratory illnesses were common in medieval spring, especially after harsh winters. The combination of weakened bodies, poor sanitation, and crowded living conditions made the spread of disease almost inevitable. Terms like ague and flux were catch-alls for fevers, chills, and diarrhea, with little understanding of cause or cure. You watch as the village healer moves tirelessly from hut to hut, offering poultices, teas, and prayers. Her remedies range from soothing to suspicious, a mix of dried herbs, vinegar, and hope. Some swear by her, others avoid her, fearing curses or contagion. Quirky tidbit. In desperate attempts to ward off illness, some villagers resorted to bizarre superstitions, wearing garlic necklaces, carrying charms made of animal bones, or even dancing in circles around the village at dusk to confuse the spirits. You think it sounds silly, but after 2 weeks of coughing and chills, you might just try it. The village atmosphere shifts. Where once there was cautious optimism about the thaw, now there's a tense hush, broken by coughing fits and whispered prayers. The church bells toll more often, sometimes for funerals, sometimes for vigils. Historians still argue about how much control medieval peasants believed they had over disease. Some argue illness was seen as divine punishment, requiring penance and prayer. Others believe practical measures like quarantine and hygiene were used sporadically, alongside superstition. You catch yourself clutching your cloak tighter as you pass neighbours who look gaunt and pale. You avoid close contact but can't help worrying if you might be next. At night, you listen for the coughs outside your door. You count the hours between fits. You pray for strength. Spring feels fragile, like a candle in a drafty room, but it's also a time of survival, resilience, and stubborn hope. Because no matter how many fevers come, you still wake up, still pull on your boots, still face the muddy fields and uncertain days ahead. And sometimes, that's all that matters. The muddy roads are alive again, not just with the usual trudging feet and clumsy carts, but with the laughter and chaos of a wedding. Yes, a wedding. Right in the middle of this soggy, unpredictable spring. It's a moment of joy, a brief burst of colour amid the grey. Your cousin's cousin is marrying a girl from the next village over, and suddenly, the whole community has a reason to dress up. Sort of. Well, as much as one can when wool and dirt are permanent accessories. The bride's dress is patched but clean, her hair braided with sprigs of fresh herbs and wildflowers. The groom's tunic is a shade lighter than usual, and he tries his best not to look terrified. The feast is humble, but heartfelt. You all sit around the fire, passing bowls of stew that taste like hope, and a bit like overcooked cabbage. Someone brought a pie, a small miracle of crust and jam that disappears within minutes. Children dart between legs, chasing the dog who's suspiciously fat for this time of year. Mainstream historical fact. Weddings in medieval villages were community affairs, often held in spring after the long winter. They marked new beginnings and social bonds. The feasts were simple but significant, involving shared food, dancing, and rituals designed to bless the couple and the community. You watch as the musicians, an old man with a fiddle and a woman with a flute, start playing a lively tune. People begin to dance, feet slipping in mud, smiles wide despite cold fingers. You join in, even though your boots are soggy and your joints protest. For a moment, the weight of winter lifts. The cold becomes a distant memory. Quirky tidbit. Some villages had strange wedding customs, like the mud wedding where guests would toss handfuls of dirt or mud at the couple to symbolize fertility and prosperity. You're pretty sure someone's doing this now. You try not to get hit. The roads are still muddy, the fields still soggy, but tonight they are roads to celebration. The entire village seems to breathe a little easier. Later, as the fire dies down and the crowd disperses, you find yourself alone outside, looking up at a sky that's just barely clearing. The stars peek through the thinning clouds, faint but steady. You feel a flicker of something warm inside, a mix of fatigue and hope. The world is still messy, still cold, still uncertain, but it's moving forward, and so are you. Historians still argue about how deeply rituals like weddings influenced peasant resilience in harsh times. Some say these gatherings were essential social glue, helping communities cope with hardship. Others see them as brief distractions from ongoing struggles. You think maybe it's both. As you trudge home, mud squelching underfoot, you smile quietly, because tonight there was music, laughter, and a little bit of light in the endless winter. You pause in the doorway, catching your breath, as a cold gust sneaks past your scarf and settles deep in your lungs. The long winter has finally loosened its grip, but the echoes linger. You think back over the months, the frozen nights, the endless stew, the constant ache of cold fingers and worried hearts. Somehow you made it. Somehow you survived. It's hard to believe, really. You remind yourself that survival wasn't guaranteed. Each day was a battle with frost, hunger, illness, and weariness. Some didn't make it. Some were lost to fever, cold, or despair. But here you are. Mainstream historical fact. Mortality rates during harsh medieval winters were notoriously high, especially among children and the elderly. Many villages lost a significant portion of their population before spring arrived. Survival was a combination of resilience, community support, and a good measure of luck. You feel the warmth of the fire behind you and the rough wood of the doorframe beneath your fingertips. The familiar sounds of your family moving about, the soft murmur of voices, the occasional clink of a cooking pot, remind you that life continues, stubborn and unyielding. You remember the moments you thought you couldn't go on, the coughing fits that racked your body, the frozen ground that refused to yield to the spade, the tax day when your hard-earned grain was taken with a smile, the nights spent shivering beside the cow, clinging to whatever warmth you could find. And yet, you're still here. Quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed that surviving winter was a kind of blessing, a sign of favour from the saints. Others thought it was merely the luck of the season, a roll of the dice played by unseen forces. Either way, surviving winter became a badge of honour, told in stories by hearthsides for generations. Historians still argue whether the harshness of medieval winters shaped social structures more than any other factor, whether they forged tighter communities out of necessity, or deepened divides as resources dwindled. Likely, it did a bit of both. You sit down by the fire, pulling your cloak tighter. Outside, the wind has softened to a whisper. The snow is melting, the day is growing longer. The promise of spring hangs fragile in the air. You close your eyes and let the warmth seep into your bones. The past months rush past in flickers, some painful, some tender. You breathe out slowly, feeling the slow return of hope. Winter tested you. It nearly broke you. But it didn't win. You survived. And that is enough. The cycle turns again. You wake to the soft light of dawn filtering through the cracked window pane. The smell of thawed earth mingles with smoke from the hearth. Outside, birds sing hesitantly, as if reminding you that life goes on, no matter how harsh the night before. You stretch, aching in places you forgot existed, and step out into a world transformed by melting snow and the promise of new growth. The fields glisten with mud and puddles, and the village buzzes with cautious energy. Children chase each other through soggy lanes, laughter carrying like a balm on the cool morning air. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval life was cyclical, governed by the seasons. Winter's harsh grip would inevitably loosen, giving way to the rhythms of planting, growth and harvest. But with every new year came fresh challenges, and survival was a constant dance with uncertainty. You breathe deeply, feeling the cold air fill your lungs, sharp and clean. There's a quiet strength in this moment, a reminder that despite everything, you're still here, still moving forward. Quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed that the turning of the seasons was overseen by unseen spirits, or gods who demanded respect and rituals to ensure good fortune. Whether through offerings, dances, or whispered prayers, these traditions wove hope into the fabric of daily life. Historians still argue about how much medieval peasants controlled their destinies versus being subject to forces beyond their understanding, be it nature, nobility, or fate itself. But your experience tells its own story. Resilience, grit, and the quiet courage of ordinary people. As you walk through the village, you see neighbours repairing fences, tending animals and sharing smiles worn but genuine. The weight of winter lingers, but so does the lightness of survival. You pause at the edge of the field, looking out over the patchwork of mud and green shoots. The earth is waking up just as you are, and though you know next winter will come again, inevitable, unyielding, you feel ready, because after everything, you've learned how to endure. The endless wheel turns once more, you take a step forward, and life continues. The fire's glow softens as evening falls. You settle deeper into your blankets, the warmth wrapping around you like a gentle promise. Outside, the wind whispers its slow lullaby, brushing the bare branches and scattering the last whispers of snow. Your body feels heavy, relaxed, a contrast to the cold and toil of the days before. In these quiet moments, the hardships fade, replaced by a sense of calm. The small victories of warmth, food, and companionship linger like a fading melody. You breathe slowly, each inhale a soft tide of peace, each exhale carrying away the tension of survival. Rest is not surrender, but renewal. The long winter, with all its trials, is behind you for now. Tomorrow holds new light, new hope, new steps toward growth. So close your eyes, feel the slow rhythm of your heartbeat. Let the quiet night enfold you. You've made it through, you are safe, and with that gentle assurance, drift deeper into dreams, carried softly on the wings of the turning seasons. Good night, 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 seasons. Good night.